Hello and welcome to another angle from Rightangled. My name is Abby. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rightangled. I'm here today to introduce you to our new podcast. It's a podcast that will be talking about health, wellness, and fitness. It's about getting the right advice from the mouths of the right people, and those are specialists and people who are at the top of the game when it comes to health and wellness. And our mission is to make sure that you get that right advice right from us. So stay tuned. We will be discussing a lot of different topics with a lot of different specialists. And today we are joined by a doctor who is specialized in lifestyle medicine, Dr. Rizwan Khan. Today will be telling us a little bit more about himself, a little bit more about his background, about his passions, and we'll be also discussing bits of COVID-19 pandemic. So stay tuned and please join me in welcoming Dr. Rizwan. Before we start, let me just introduce myself to those who haven't heard about us before, and to tell you as well a little bit more about our company, Dr. Rizwan.
I started the company on a technology to detect DNA sequences on a lateral flow assay, which is like a strip to detect DNA sequences on it. That is something that I was developing during my master's year at Warwick Uni, and we filed the patent for it. But then I came across this big obstacle that a lot of innovators in this field find, which is finding money and getting the venture capitalists to really fund a project that has just the proof of concept before it goes into the trials that would precede the market launch. So they advised me to go and start writing grants, but after two of them came refused from Innovate UK because of my writing skills, I decided that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to become really skilled in writing. So at that time, my colleague Florian, she came up with the idea of developing a service to deliver DNA testing to people. And we realized very quickly that there's a big backlash from the medical community about these services, mainly because they are not delivering information in the right way. They were more delivering it as a direct to consumer, just giving information to people and telling them their risks and telling them off you go. And that was causing a lot of pressure on the NHS. So we had to devise a model that would allow doctors to review patients' genetic results alongside their environmental factors, which are equally important in the expression of genes. So by that, giving the doctors all the information they would need to be able to give people action plans on what to do next. And that's really the key value proposition that we started with. We developed our hard DNA test as our first product, and we launched it with the backing of NHS England. So they pre-seed funded us on that idea, and that enabled us to build the MVP and launch the service. And then we went on to develop the second product, which was more into fitness and diet. And in the same model and the same platform, we released the service to personal trainers and dietitians to be involved in the delivery of action plans to people. Um, just on Monday, we launched our COVID-19 test, which is a home-based test that is based on a molecular assay that is FDA approved and have went through the clinical evaluation from Public Health England to determine the specificity and the sensitivity of the test. And we're now using this assay to deliver these home-based testing to people.
What's the specificity and the sensitivity of the test?
So the test is sensitive up to 100 copies of the viral load. So that's a really low. So it's 100% sensitive up to 100 copies, which is a very low quantity of the virus.
Sensitive, is it?
That's the sensitivity. It's highly sensitive, so it's a 100%
Okay.
to 100 copies of the virus. The specificity of the test is 99%. That's the overall percentage agreement of the test. It's one of the tests that is currently used in the NHS. So we're using the same methodologies with the same assays, basically the reagents for the qPCR process itself?
It's just because I've heard in the hospital from some of the specialists that some of the testings are the sensitivity of it is 70%. That's great that if you've got such a high sensitivity and specificity.
Yeah, so the test is FDA approved, and it have gone through the clinical evaluation for exclusivity and inclusivity from Public Health England. So it has been rigorously tested as an assay. But as you know, it's all down to the labs that really do the biosafety for the procedures and making sure that it's all the processes are adhered to from the published guidelines. And that's what we have set up over the past 2 weeks.
Cool. Well done.
Thank you very much. So just,
Okay.
yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and some background about you.
I'm Dr. Riz, and I was born in the UK. I've got Pakistani Indian roots. That's what my background is. But I'm a Londoner through and through. I've been a medical doctor for about 14 years now. I went in to train as a GP, so I've been a GP for about 10 years now. And when I was about 30, I realised that I wanted to have a specialist interest. And what I realised was that I was getting very frustrated with general practice because we were treating diseases, Western lifestyle-based diseases, but not really having the right training to help people or advise people appropriately. I thought it was too medication based. So what we generally see in general practice in the UK are diseases, chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension. All these can be related to sort of lifestyle problems. So and Western lifestyle problems. So say 40 to 50 years ago, these diseases were very rare. But since the Western lifestyle has come into play, we've started to have all these diseases, and I felt like instead of preventing them from happening and educating people about how to prevent people from getting these diseases, we were treating them with medications as a shortcut. And yeah, it didn't really go with my ethos. So I decided, in medical school or GP training, we never really got much lifestyle medicine training. Lifestyle medicine training it's a specialty.
How did you come across lifestyle medicine as a specialty, and what is your mission as well? Like, I see on your Instagram bio,
Yeah.
you have joined me on my mission to help you discover and then discover the secret of health and happiness. So tell me more about that.
Lifestyle medicine is a specialty interest, a new one, a medical specialty, a new one that's really developing very fast. It came from America, and it came about the idea that we were in Western-based medicine, we were too focused on drug-based treatments, and we were thinking about treatment rather than actually prevention. So a group of people just decided to take that further and start discussing prevention training. A lot of people also call it preventative medicine, and it's sort of come across to the UK, and there is now a big movement because these diseases are becoming very common, like diabetes, ischemic heart disease, hypertension, depression, anxiety, and all these can be related to lifestyle issues. And in my opinion, I think all of them are preventable. So I sort of devised a 5-pillar plan where you look at the 5 fundamental aspects of lifestyle, which I've divided into nutrition, sleep and stress, exercise, awareness of sort of bad habits like alcohol and smoking, and creativity. So what I'm trying to do is sort of educate people about these fundamental pillars of life, and if we can get that correct, then you probably won't need to see a doctor. You probably will be healthy, and if you're healthy, then you're going to be happy. So yeah, that's been my mission, and yeah, I have started this Instagram handle. I'm currently writing a book about the 5 pillars of health, which encompass all the things that I've been talking about. And it's really just to get people to take back control of their own lives, really. I mean, people need to be educated on all these things. And what will happen is that once they're aware of what they're doing to their bodies and the way they're carrying out their lifestyles, they'll realize that, health, true health, is actually related to those things rather than any specific medication. Now, I'm not saying that medication hasn't got a role in medicine, but for chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension, ischemic heart disease, depression, anxiety, these are largely preventable. And I think I was probably seeing about 80% of patients in my practice where I would sort of reflect on the patient and think, why has this patient come into me? And 80% of the time they didn't need to be in the GP practice. They
Yeah.
they could have sorted out their own problems if they just had the right awareness and education. And I guess that's my mission, really, is to raise that awareness and education about these things, that prevention is better than cure.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that the NHS have started to push a lot with, especially with social prescribing, right? So you see a lot of the initiatives by the NHS is moving towards preventative medicine, whether it's through genomics medicine to be able to better risk stratify patients, or whether it's through social prescribing that is currently being pushed through the GP practices and other working centers. Okay, so where do you see this fitting with the current pandemic that we're seeing today with COVID-19? What role is this playing now?
Well, I think COVID-19 has got, if you look at the news and you see which kind of patients are being affected by the virus, coronavirus, which is actually called SARS-CoV-2. So, coronavirus is a family of viruses, and the actual virus is called SARS-CoV-2. And then the actual disease that manifests from SARS-CoV-2 is called COVID-19. So these people who are getting COVID-19, they are largely the elderly population and the people who've got coexisting long-term medical conditions like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, especially heart disease, I think, and people who've got problems with their immunity. So if they've got a lowered immune system because they have a certain pathology or because they're taking some immunosuppressant drugs, this can increase your risk of getting critically ill by COVID-19. So I think lifestyle medicine is probably of paramount importance, because all the things that you can sort of do with sort of the 5 pillars that I've talked about, with your nutrition, your exercise, stopping bad habits like smoking and alcohol and taking recreational drugs, managing your sleep and stress well, and being creative. These things, make your immune system strong. And hopefully, if you're doing that well, your immune system will be strong enough to fight this condition.
It's all about immunity, as you perfectly said, and I just want to ask you about creativity, because usually you see doctors talking about exercise, talking about the benefits of good diet, about not having bad habits, and it's the usual advice that you would get from your doctor. But creativity is a very interesting pillar that you've incorporated into this, which I wanted to ask you a little bit more. Why is it so important to incorporate in everyday's life, or everyone's lifestyle, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people don't really focus on creativity, but what we know is that the whole reason why humanity has evolved has been because of our ability to create. The whole reason why technology and science has gone so far is because we have creative minds, we have imaginative minds, and that's why we run this planet. And what I've found is that in a situation where people are stressed or anxious or sort of doing jobs with long hours, people often forget about their creative side. And what I've found is, well, you talk about social prescribing, but what I've found is by prescribing creativity, people seem to get a lot healthier and happier.
And a lot more social as well, because they need other
Well, it's
people
all
to be creative.
exactly.
Yeah.
So creativity is linked with becoming more social. All the creative things that we do, whether it's performing arts or music or developing any other sort of creative skill. I mean, science can be very creative as well. I'm sure, you making this assay, I mean, that's pretty creative for me as well. And I think what we need to realize is that it's vitally important to have that aspect, because if you don't, then subconsciously your brain will be telling you, well, will be channeling things towards sort of stress and anxiety. It's also linked with happiness. The happier you are, the better your nutrition is, the more you want to be active, the better your sleep is, the more creative you are. So it's all interlinked, and I think it's good to be aware of it. Be aware of the fact that if you are feeling low or you feel like something's missing from your life, it might be that element of creativity, especially in these times where everyone is so isolated, because it's often nice to self-reflect and think about how you could improve your life. And if you're talking about health, picking up a new hobby is a fantastic way to improve your health, in my opinion, because I think health doesn't just encompass, exercise, nutrition. It's a very holistic thing. It's everything, really. It's your social interactions. It's what you do in your life, how you're living it. So that's my personal opinion. And I mean, I talk about this a bit more on my Instagram page.
Which
Personally,
I'm on at the moment, actually, and I can see that you are someone that likes to participate in a lot of different activities, and
well,
it's
before this,
fascinating to see that. Yeah.
yeah, well, before this, I was actually taking a sabbatical from medicine. So last September, I decided to do a postgrad in drama. So
Yeah.
I've been at drama school for the last 8 to 9 months, and unfortunately, it closed down. And there was never a doubt in my mind what I was going to do. I was going to go back to the hospital and help my colleagues in the emergency department, because that's what's needed right now. But yeah, I mean, I do music as well, and I think there's a lot to be said about music therapy and how music is vitally important in health. But that's another topic.
Tell us more about it. Like, I'm really intrigued to know more about this. Is it something that you felt that you always been passionate about, or is it something that you just wanted to try out and you enjoyed and you would like to try again once this pandemic settles down?
Oh no, no, definitely. It's definitely more than a hobby. It's kind of yeah, probably a serious hobby. I mean, I was never going to stop being a doctor,
Yeah.
but I guess for me, variety is the spice of life as well, and sometimes we can get stuck in something, and I think it just depends on your personality, right? But for me, what keeps me going is developing myself, developing, medically and also creatively. So I think it takes a while for you to realize what you really want to do in life, right? It's a tricky question. And going to university at the age of 18, which I did, I didn't really know what I really wanted to do. Sort of influenced, I mean, you probably know about sort of British. Where are you from?
I'm from Saudi.
Are you from Saudi? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, got sort of Indian, Pakistani roots, and they
And being a doctor is one of the things that you need to tick, right?
being a doctor is like a parent's, but their son becoming a doctor is.
Tell me about it. Yes, I know very well about that. Actually, as something that I didn't tell you when you asked me about my background, I actually did medicine for a couple of
Did you?
years. Yes,
Oh,
and I did not like it. I did not like it a single bit because I'm someone that likes to do things. And as you well know, studying medicine involves a lot of learning,
yeah.
and I just wanted to be out there. So that's one of the things that got me to combine my. I always liked science. Science is something that I've always been fascinated about, and I love the lab, and I love the experiments and the creativity in science that you can actually have. But I did not like the learning part of it. So usually, what you find in the UK, students come to go into biomedicine, and then they go into medical graduate school to go into a graduate course in medicine.
Hmm.
I did the other way around. I actually did medicine and then I moved to biomedicine or biomedical sciences. And it wasn't until my final year of uni when I actually discovered that I actually wanted to do something more in business. So I actually combined that science background with business in my master's, where I did medical biotech and business management.
Okay, so this makes sense now.
And yeah, it's been an amazing journey since then. So you're perfectly right. It's about trying to find the things that you truly like and having, I think, also the freedom to do it, I guess. I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. Because even if you are creative, going into a creative job is not going to be as secure as becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. And I guess for me, since I reached sort of the pinnacle of my medical career when I became a GP, although I work in the emergency department now, it was nice to go into sort of the creative industry at that point because I know I've always got something to fall back on as well if
Yeah.
things don't go right. But I'm also really interested in the media and educating people. So the drama school has really helped in that respect.
So I want to ask you a question. So from someone that actually works in the NHS, the
Yeah.
NHS has a very big focus on driving innovation and adoption of innovation. And as a company at Triangle, we are very grateful for the seed fund that they gave us to build the service that we currently have. However, when it comes to actually implementing innovation, there is a culture in the NHS that is quite risk averse, and things do not get taken up as quickly as, I don't know, maybe the private sector in different countries. Do you feel this the same way, like from someone who works in the NHS? Do you feel that creativity is not adopted as quickly as it should within the NHS?
Yeah, I think, being a health service that's free, it has limited funding, and the bare minimum is usually what's found, unfortunately. But it's difficult. I can see what you're talking about, and I think you're right. I think it's probably difficult for them to implement these things or take risks because they simply just don't have the access to the funds. This is what I think anyway. But at the same time, that might be limiting them as well. And if you do find a new innovation, that may actually in the long term save you money, right? So
So that's one of the things that we have been really trying to navigate whilst we were launching our genetic testing services. We were highly commended for the economic impact that our platform would enable the NHS to use as a mean to deploy genetic testing on a population level, especially that heart DNA test that we currently have could be used as a screening test for people or to risk stratify them for cardiac conditions and to optimize their treatments. Nevertheless, when we were actually going to start speaking with the key decision makers about the service, there was this notion of, great, let's submit this form, let's submit this, let's do this submission, let's do this, let's do that, which does not lead anywhere, so to speak. There is a lot of ongoing discussions about the uptake of the service at the moment, mainly because we have validated our service in the private market. But the thing is that we had to really test ourselves in the privately, and we had to go through the medical insurance businesses before the NHS would look back and say, okay, this is something that we can uptake. My thinking would be for other innovations that might not have the cash, let's say, to raise funds or to the runway to actually be able to validate their services privately. Their innovation, which could actually save the NHS a lot of money, could become obsolete, mainly because they did not find anyone to really give them the chance to validate their services in a clinical setting. So, do you think there could be something that there's something that could be done to change that notion or that sentiment within the NHS as an organization?
quite possibly. I guess there was some people who could. I don't really know. I'm not an expert in this field, unfortunately. I wish I could give you a straight answer, but I think it's based on the funding, really, and the experts who think that whether they can. Well, they call them the managers in the NHS, and I guess if they're advised by the right specialist or the right medical advisor, but I'm not too sure whether they're taking advice from these people. It's difficult for me to say, really. I'm not really in that field, really, so I don't know what goes on day in, day out. But I think you have a point there, and there should be room for new innovation that should help the NHS and hopefully optimize it so that it reduces its costs.
So I just wanted to ask you another thing on another note about COVID-19. So someone who's currently working, you mentioned at the emergency departments, right? So what is the situation there like?
So, in what respect were you just in
So,
the emergent COVID-19 at the moment?
yeah.
Right now, I think we are dealing with it in a stable way. The emergency departments are quite busy. There's a lot of COVID-19 patients. The ICU beds are quite full. And the problem is not going to be now. It's going to be in the next 2 or 3 weeks where, the spike starts to go up. So I think we're sort of just bracing ourselves for the spike, but right now it's being managed well. I think the other point is that a lot of people think it's only affecting the elderly, but I've seen myself that a lot of younger people without medical problems are
Yeah,
also
we
getting
heard the
affected.
news actually, yeah, a few days ago.
Yeah, there's a few junior doctors and a few consultants who are actually requiring ICU beds and ventilation, otherwise fit and well. However, I have to admit it is true that the elderly are the ones that are at most risk and the most affected. But to think that you're invincible if you're young, fit, and healthy is wrong, because you're not. And also, I think this is what's fueling the problem with the social distancing measures that aren't being taken seriously. And I think people need to realise that we are actually at a biological war with this virus, and these measures that have been taken by the government are correct.
In terms of social distancing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the first time I've heard Boris Johnson do a speech that I was very proud about. He really put his foot down, and I think that was the correct step. And hopefully that's going to save lives, because the social distancing is the measure that's going to save more lives than any doctor.
So do you think this will help us to flatten the curve?
Absolutely. If you look at what's happened in China, if you look at I mean, their measures, they're a sort of communist society. Their measures were even more severe, and if you look at them now, I mean, there's no more reported cases there, and
That's some light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, this is the only way, really. And however severe the measures are, they are correct and they are for a short period of time. And the more people that adhere to it, the quicker we're going to get out of this.
But in your opinion, why did it take us that long to actually enforce it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard for me to say. I think it's probably a mixture of
And economical, of course, yeah.
economical, and scientific data. Also, we're living in a country with a massive population. We're not a country like China. We're a free democratic society, and so to implement these kind of measures all of a sudden would have been quite a task, I think. And to do it at this slow way, gradual build up, I think was fairly reasonable. I think the government's taking advice from the top medical experts, and they have all the data. So I can't give you the exact answer, but I think the government's response has been fairly appropriate. I think they're doing the right things. They're saying the right things. This is just my medical opinion, anyway. I think the only problem is the problem inside the hospitals with the protective equipment, which is still lacking, unfortunately, from the places that I've worked. I haven't been fully protected. If you look at the World Health Organization guidelines, they ask anyone who sees a suspected case of COVID-19 to be wearing a mask, a gown, gloves, and eye protection. And I haven't been on a shift yet where I've been given eye protection.
No way, really?
Yeah, no, I've never had eye protection. They just don't have visors or the goggles. So I think they're trying their best. This is the guidance that the World Health Organization gives, by the way. It's the local guidance is that you don't need to wear goggles. But, the local guidance is probably driven by the fact that we don't have any. And, you can't guide something. You can't tell someone to wear something if they don't have it. So
Yeah, it's quite difficult, definitely.
yeah.
But here's my other thing. Actually, it's something that I was discussing with a colleague of mine recently. There's a lot of reports about the fact that the number of people who are actually infected by COVID-19 in the UK are much, much higher than the ones that have been tested and counted, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, with social distancing, it's absolutely a very effective measure. There's a quite consensus around this across all nations. That is the most effective way to really control this pandemic. However, with the new test that the government is currently preparing to launch over the next couple of weeks, especially the immunoassays, a lot of people will be testing themselves, and they will find there's a percentage of them that is definitely going to be finding a positive result. Now, what impact do you think this will have on the NHS? Do you think every positive result should be put in an ICU?
No, of course not.
So how will you manage all that surge of people coming and saying, hey, I have coronavirus?
Yeah, well, currently we're managing it by telling people that if you have coronavirus symptoms, if you have a temperature or a continuous cough, not to come to the hospital, to self-isolate. So, if you are otherwise well, there is no reason for you to come to the hospital. It's only if you have, problems with your breathing or you feel unwell with your symptoms that you should call 111, or if you're very unwell to call, obviously the ambulance if you think you've got a life-threatening condition. Now, regards to the I think you're referring to the antibody test, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so a positive result. I mean, I don't know how accurate these antibody tests are, but obviously, with an antibody test, a positive result tells you that you've had an infection. It doesn't necessarily tell you that you're having an infection at that moment in time.
Exactly.
So, the data will tell us whether someone's, actually got immunity to it, but it won't tell us whether they're infectious or not.
Exactly. So that's the thing, is that it's a great initiative to get these tests because they are cheap, right? Everyone can access them. But don't you think it will cause more worry and anxiety amongst people than the anticipated benefits of it?
I don't know how it's going to pan out. I think these tests will be better used a little bit later on down the line when social distancing measures are being relaxed, when we've had our period of isolation. I'm not sure. It depends on how the government advises people about it. But I guess you're referring to the fact that whether, they should be having the PCR test.
Not really, not necessarily, because as you know, PCR testing is not as affordable, and it definitely have its cost to the providers. So it cannot be put on a mass scale that the NHS can afford. So immunoassays or these strips seem to be the quickest way to get a yes or no reading, given that the sensitivity and specificity of these tests are quite high to give that precision in the result. However, I'm just thinking about it from a population level or from a public health perspective. Is it really the right move?
This is how I'm thinking about it. If you have a positive antibody test, so for the people that might not understand, when you develop an infection, your body's immune response is to produce antibodies against it to fight the infection. So we can detect these antibodies in the blood by doing an antibody test. So my opinion is that if you have a positive antibody test and you give yourself another 14 days of isolation, then you're not infectious anymore. Or I think it's 7 days, isn't it? It's not 14, sorry. It says 7 days, yes. You give yourself a further 7 days of isolation after taking the antibody test, that means that you're not infectious anymore.
I'm not really an expert at this subject, but I'm just because we deal with people on in a direct way as well,
Yeah.
and we see their responses online on our social media,
Yeah.
and there is a genuine concern, and it's quite
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well understood. So I'm just a little bit worried about the pressure on the NHS.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
yeah.
I think what will happen is that hopefully, before the testing comes out, there is a big, drive in awareness about the test and what it means if you have a positive test, rather than people just sending out these tests with to the public when they don't have an idea of what it means. So I'm hoping when these tests do come out, because obviously this is a new situation, and I don't think I don't think we've ever had to do something on this scale before. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Strange times, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So, I can't give you the exact answer. I mean, these things will be evolving as they happen. I mean, at the moment, we're still in the very early stages. So the peak of the actual illness isn't supposed to arrive until another 2 months. So, we're still at the very early stages of the pandemic in this country.
Indeed, we will all, as a society and a country, I think, and as like a human race, will come out of it stronger and better. And
What doesn't kill
So,
you makes you stronger, right?
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And surely, lifestyle medicine will have its role in the future or in our post COVID-19 life, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I can't recommend that enough. It's hard enough being in isolation and motivating yourself, but I think people need to think about, they need to try and put a positive spin on it, because even though it is a difficult place, if people change their perspective on this time, I mean, if you think about it, in their lifetimes, they're never going to have this time alone in isolation. So, what I'm saying to myself is, how can I make the most of this? Because, this is a great time for self-reflection. You might not be able to get close to other people, but, it's an amazing time to get closer to yourself and find out about yourself, and I think it's a valuable time, and try and see the positive side, and do something with this time, because generally we're always too busy, aren't we? I mean, our
yeah.
lives are going and going and going and going, and suddenly now, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I've always craved to have. I mean, although I'm not having much time off, I am having a bit more time off, because I'm still working at the hospital. But the time that I'm having off, I'm really valuing it. And if you can make your health better by improving your habits, or learning a new skill like cooking, and learning to cook healthier things, then this is gonna have an impact on your future. So make the
This is
most of it.
so this is so amazing to hear because we have been actually hosting few guests recently, and every single one of them so far have said the same exact thing. Use the time to develop better habits, have a plan, have your goals in place, and just use it to actually address these things that have been on your back burner for some time. So really great to hear that coming from you as well. So yeah, it's really amazing to hear that. Thank you very much for sharing that. So as a final note, do you have any kind of final health tips for people to really incorporate into their COVID-19 life, I guess, that they're having now?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at myself and what I've done, I think maybe if I'll just focus on the main ones. I think the biggest challenge is keeping mobile and active.
Yeah.
For me, I was a member of a gym. I was also a member of a yoga club. So that feeling of community really helped motivate me to go and exercise. Uh,
100% I agree.
and
Yeah.
being in self-isolation, the hardest thing will be to try and motivate yourself. So what I encourage is, it takes approximately 21 days to develop a habit.
Yeah.
So if you can force yourself to do it for a few weeks, or develop the habit that you're going to organize it in your schedule when you wake up in the morning, even if it's just for half an hour, that would be great. There's an emerging amount of online resources now. Everyone, I mean, the gyms and the yoga clubs. I just got an email from my yoga club saying they're doing online classes now. So
Everyone is doing online classes, aren't they?
yeah,
It's like everywhere.
yeah.
It's
So
like another pandemic now.
yeah. So I think try and motivate yourself to do that. I mean, you still can go out once a day. You are allowed to go out, and I think the weather's getting better. So, if you're someone that likes to cycle or run,
Yeah.
I would certainly encourage that. You need to get out there. It's important to try and get some vitamin D from the sun, because we've been lacking it the whole of autumn and winter. So get out there and absorb a bit of the vitamin D from the sun. And
Absolutely.
the other thing would probably be the other thing that I've started to do is make a journal in the mornings, and that's really helping me sort of reflect a lot more, and it's helping me throughout the day. I think it's really important, actually. I mean, the reason why I started doing it is because I watched something online about journaling, and the most important time to journal is early in the morning, because that is one of your most creative times, because you've just
Interesting.
you've just had your sleep. You've been having all these dreams, and you might not remember your dreams, but there's a lot of creative work going on while you're having your dreams. So a lot of these really successful people, actually, if you look at all these successful people, they all recommend you journal in the morning, because that's where all the creative ideas come out and flow. So I've tried to do that for 15 minutes a day, every day. The fact that I've actually got time for it, which is great. And I guess try and find a new hobby if you can. If there's always something that you wanted to do, and you've always said to yourself that you've never had the time to do it, then now is the time. You're not going to get the time again to do it. So whether it's
Definitely not. Hopefully not.
or reading a
Hopefully
book,
not.
or if you've got a pile of books like I have
Yeah.
on the edge
Yeah.
on the edge of my on the end of my bed.
Any recommendations for good books to read?
Well, right now I'm reading. Let me see. I'm reading. Well, apart from the acting books that I'm reading, because obviously I'm doing drama. There is a book which actually comes on rather fittingly. There's a book called Becoming Supernatural. I think you might like this yourself, actually. Have you heard of it?
Okay.
I haven't. I haven't.
It's by Doctor Joe Dispenza,
Okay.
and he's a neuroscientist, and he's a specialist in epigenetics,
Interesting.
psycho neuroimmunology, quantum physics, and electromagnetism. And basically, the book it's based around sort of training your mind and body through meditative techniques. So he has his basically it's based around meditation and quite old traditional Buddhist values, but he's putting a scientific take on it.
Interesting. I love that.
It's really, really interesting, and it's a fascinating book for scientists, because it's quite scientific, and it's there's a lot of physics in it as well. So if you're into sort of quantum theory and things like that, it's very, very fascinating.
I can tell you one thing for sure is that our listeners would definitely be interested in science.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this advice. I literally took a note of this book and will endure to read it over this 3 months.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much. It was really amazing and lovely speaking with you.
You too. Very
We
interesting.
wish you really best of luck over this next phase, and thank you for your efforts. Actually, I think you are one of the many heroes that we currently having in the country that are on the front line, and we salute you absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. It's very kind of you to say. Stay safe, guys. Stay safe. Keep your distance, because that's what's going to be saving lives more than any doctor. And just wash your hands. Keep washing your hands. And
That's it.
those are the simple instructions at the moment. That's gonna help everybody.
It's always in that. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye
You
bye.
too. Cheers. Bye bye.